child. Be positive and friendly. Tell children in advance how you expect them to behave. Don't use harsh consequences such as hitting and shouting. Instead, teach responsibility for actions and affirm positive behavior. Make a basic schedule which they can follow. Children like structure. Let children express themselves and respond positively. Make the learning experience visual and interactive. Remember that home-based learning should be at their own pace, no pressure. Make time for leisure and exercise. Get them out for fresh air and sunshine and have fun, fun, fun.
Protect yourself from the novel coronavirus. Wash your hands thoroughly and frequently for at least 20 seconds each time. Avoid shaking hands and touching your face with unclean hands. If you have to cough or sneeze, do so into your flexed elbow or a paper towel and then dispose of it. Keep a distance of 3 feet away from anyone with the cold or flu-like symptoms. Boost your immune system with vitamins, drink plenty of water and get adequate rest. Visit your doctor, the nearest hospital or health center if you or a family member becomes ill. A message from the Ministry of Health and the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA. If you own or work with animals, please follow these tips to avoid getting the coronavirus. Please keep pets away from areas where you are preparing food and eating your meals. Thoroughly wash your hands after handling animals and animal waste. Avoid contact with sick or stray animals. And always remember to wear protective gowns, gloves, and facial protection when handling them. As the novel coronavirus spreads, it is important that you continually disinfect your home. Viruses can gather on surfaces such as doorknobs, computer keyboards and mouse, cell phones, tablets, railings, kitchen and bathroom countertops, and remote control devices. To avoid transfer of viruses, wipe down these surfaces regularly with disinfectants such as Clorox, Lysol wipes, or soap and water. Avoid touching your face or your loved one's faces after touching any of these types of surfaces. It is very easy for viruses to be transferred in this way. When preparing food, be sure to use different knives and cutting boards for raw meat and cooked foods. Wash your hands before and after handling raw meats. Also, wash your hands before and after using cooked food. Be sure to cook food thoroughly before eating it. This is a message from the Ministry of Health and the National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA.
So you understand what's going on?
Yeah man, it's easy.
Okay, cool. Alright then, look like you know what's going on.
Older children may need less supervision, but they need your full support. A few tips for assisting children with online or home-based study. Check in regularly. Ask questions about what they are doing. Don't shout or get frustrated if they don't understand. Encourage them to take breaks from time to time. Be affectionate. Be positive. Sometimes a simple touch goes a long way. As much as possible, provide a comfortable space for children to work in. You may want to be more lenient with the desired study location for teens. Encourage them to focus by minimizing distractions such as television, music, or telephone. As much as possible, encourage them to separate their eating spaces from their study spaces, minimizing the risk of damaging devices.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, the expert body on coronavirus, has released guidance for general public and healthcare professionals on the symptoms of the virus. A person could be at risk if they have any or all of the following: fever and symptoms of lower respiratory illness, such as coughing or difficulty breathing after traveling to areas with positive cases, or having close contact with someone who is ill and is now under investigation for the virus in the past 2 weeks. Fever or symptoms of lower respiratory illness after having close contact in the past 2 weeks with someone who has been confirmed to have the virus. The CDC defines close contact as being within about 6 feet 1.8 meters or within the room or care area of a person with the coronavirus for a prolonged period without appropriate protective clothing or having direct contact with the infectious secretions of a person with the virus without protective clothing. Coronaviruses are particularly dangerous for people who have weaker immune systems, like young children and older adults. To protect yourself from the virus, try to avoid contact with people who display symptoms similar to those of pneumonia or the common cold, like coughing or a runny nose. Don't touch your eyes, nose, or mouth with unwashed hands. Wash your hands frequently with soap and water and scrub for at least 20 seconds. Use alcohol-based hand sanitizer when possible. Be careful when handling pets. The only current treatment for coronavirus being offered is supportive in nature. If you notice any of these symptoms and conditions, please contact your nearest professional healthcare setup. Help spread this information to everyone.
Afternoon, and welcome to the COVID-19, the National Emergency Operations Center briefing for today, Saturday, 8th of August, 2020. We thank you very much for joining us for today's briefing. It is the second press briefing that we are having for this week. Of course, we know that the emergency powers COVID-19 regulations number 38 came into effect today. We continue to partner with you, the general public, and all institutions in terms of managing the COVID-19 pandemic here in St. Kitts and Nevis. We thank you for your continued support of this briefing. Today I would invite first Director of Early Childhood, Ms. Kimona Brown, to share some remarks with us. Ms. Brown.
A pleasant afternoon to all. The COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in the formulation and ongoing execution of a number of plans to reopen the early childhood sector. One of these plans involved the sensitization of all workers in early childhood in St. Kitts and Nevis to COVID-19 health and hygiene guidelines for child care settings. In an effort to ensure the health and safety of children and staff in the early childhood centers, the Early Childhood Development Unit, in collaboration with the Ministry of Education and the National COVID-19 Task Force, developed a set of regulations for the safe operation of early childhood centers in St. Kitts and Nevis. Over the past 2 weeks, assessments have been conducted on a number of public and private early childhood centers. I am happy to report that 5 private centers have been assessed and granted approval for reopening. A number of private centers have been scheduled to be assessed next week. Additionally, 14 of 15 public early childhood centers gained approval and will be in operation from Monday, 10th August 2020. The Old Road Daycare Center is undergoing maintenance presently, and we hope that this facility can be approved and reopened shortly. At each approved center, a certificate of approval will be posted in a conspicuous place at the entrance of this facility. Assessments for the reopening of all public and private centers in Nevis will commence shortly. However, all centers in Nevis are expected to be in operation by September 7th. Now that some centers have been approved for reopening, we expect all early childhood staff, parents, and guardians to adopt and follow special operational procedures at the early childhood facilities. We will now look at the arrival, screening, and departure procedures for early childhood facilities. Guidelines for entering an early childhood facility. 1. Identify and use any one of the approved entry points to the center. 2. On entering the compound, look for posted signs which would provide instructions as to how to proceed. The regulations will require a person entering the premises to A. Queue up at the marked screening area by standing on the visible markers. B. Wear face mask while on the compound. And C. Sanitize hands. Screening area procedure. At each center, parents will encounter a screening area where 2 staff members will be stationed. 1. A staff member will perform temperature checks on all staff and children only, while the other staff member will be assigned to usher in the children. Please note, no temperature checks will be taken for parents. 2. A child or staff member who has a temperature that is equal to or greater than 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit or 38 degrees Celsius will not be allowed to enter the building. A second temperature reading will be taken half hour after the first reading to confirm whether there is a sustained elevated temperature. If the second temperature reading is acceptable, then the staff member or child will be allowed entry. 3. All temperatures and any related respiratory symptoms will be recorded in a logbook daily. This book is important and will be used for contact tracing if necessary. 4. Parents of children in Nursery 1 are asked to have an extra blanket for the worker who is taking the baby from the parent. This staff member will be properly attired in an apron and a blanket over their shoulder, which provides a barrier or protection between the worker and the children. Additionally, this worker must be sanitized before taking each baby. 5. In the regular register provided, parents or responsible adults must sign in their children. Guidelines for departure. 1. A responsible adult is required to take a child from the center. 2. The child must be signed out in the register provided. Restrictions. 1. A child or staff member who is sent home because of suspicious signs or symptoms of COVID-19 cannot return to the center unless a certificate from the doctor or community health nurse indicates the person is well enough to re-enter the school's population. 2. Only a responsible adult can bring children to and take children from the center. Children will not be allowed to drop off or take children from the center. 3. Parents are no longer allowed inside the centers. They can only enter the compound to drop off or pick up their children. 4. Impromptu meetings at centers between teachers or supervisor and parents will not be permitted. All meetings must be conducted electronically or by strict appointments. 5. An on-duty traffic warden must not take children from any means of transportation and bring them to the center. 6. Children must not be dropped off from buses unattended. They must be accompanied by a responsible adult to the center. 7. Any visibly sick or ill staff member or child will not be allowed entry into the center. 8. All staff must wear a face mask upon entry and while inside the center. 9. Children will not wear a face mask at any time. 10. Under supervision, children's hands will be washed with soap and water, rinsed properly, then dried completely. Children will not use hand sanitizers because of the alcohol content, which can irritate their mouth and skin. In conclusion, the information presented today will be repackaged in other forms and provided to the public. A video and flyers will be disseminated shortly to provide details on the procedures outlined in this presentation. The regulations enforced for reopening early childhood centers are there to protect and limit the spread of COVID-19 and any other communicable diseases. We encourage everyone to be very understanding of the new normal we are now facing. As such, we are all obligated to make personal changes as we become more respectful and caring community members. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brown, Director of Early Childhood Education. I now invite Mr. William Vincent Hodge, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, to address us. Mr. Hodge.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Good afternoon, all persons present in the briefing center here, as well as those viewing online. Pleasant good afternoon to you. First, I wish to thank Ms. Brown for a very comprehensive report on the reopening of the early childhood centers. I'm certain that the information is going to be spread widely and will generate a number of questions. We'll be happy to respond to you at the end of the briefing today. First of all, well, secondly, I want to make some announcements in relation to the CXC exams and the CAPE exams as well. We are quite aware that on the 29th of July, with the passage of the tropical storm, the tropical cyclone number 9, we had to cancel a number of examinations on that day. Subsequently, we had to make an appeal or write to CXC to ask that the students be allowed to sit these examinations, examinations as against waiting until next year, which was actually the option that CXC wanted to put forward. So I'm happy to report that CXC has agreed to reschedule these exams for the 11th and the 12th of August this year. That's next week, Tuesday and Wednesday. All examinations would be offered via e-testing. This is the modality that CXC is actually pushing towards, and so with this opportunity, they have said that one of the conditions under which we can take these examinations is that it would have to be via e-testing. Having been notified of the new dates at the end of the work week yesterday, Friday 7th, we are currently working to schedule the shifts to accommodate students. We are aware that the oral examinations scheduled for August 10th to the 14th will be impacted, and as such, some changes would be required. The oral exams, along with the subject areas cited, will be completed on those days. On Tuesday, the AM, it's English B at 9 and Caribbean History at 1 p.m. The Examinations Department within the Ministry of Education will apprise the public of the venue for the shift system. Please know that all students would have to report to the various venues 1 hour before the examinations begin. Candidates who are not on the shift system who are not on the first shift would be held in isolation to preserve the integrity of all the examinations. So we are asking members of the public, the students, the candidates in particular, to be aware of this. Allowances will be made for invigilators to be assigned in the holding rooms for students, and candidates would be informed accordingly. I want to express the appreciation of the Ministry of Education to our local registrar who is acting, Ms. Jacqueline Fleming. This information has been communicated to secondary school principals and heads of other examining bodies. In case of questions or clarification, you may contact Ms. Jacqueline Fleming at 467-1404. I now turn my attention to the proposed plan for the reopening of the primary and secondary sectors of the Ministry of Education. Like the early childhood sector, these sectors were closed in March. A certain amount of work was done with students who were given packets to take home, and some teachers, regrettably not all, were able to engage their children or their students online. School went into an extended closure until the formal closure came on July 10th this year. So as it is, students and teachers are now on their summer vacation. However, within a few days, in just about 2 weeks or so, teachers would be re-engaged with training for teaching in the virtual environment. All teachers would be engaged in this training, and the specific information will be communicated to them via their principals. Teachers of grade 4 and grade 6 would engage in additional training for the piloting of the new curriculum at that level, grades 4 and grade 6. On September 7th and 8th, all teachers would report to their physical buildings, their schools, the brick and mortar buildings, as we say. On the 7th, it's the official opening via virtual ceremony, where the Honorable Minister of Education would address all of the education employees. Those 2 days, 7th and 8th, teachers will be working in their schools to convene their various meetings, staff meetings, department meetings, subject level meetings, orientation of teachers new to their schools, including new teachers to the profession, and such like. Students would begin arriving on Wednesday the 9th of September. At the primary level, all kindergarten, grade 1 and grade 2 students will attend school daily, every day. Kindergarten, grade 1 and 2 students will attend school every day, all day, and it's for the full day, 8:30 to 3:30. Schools that are be considered very large, 3 of them in the Basti area and Sandy Point Primary School, will attend on a shift system. Those middle-sized primary schools, some of them may have to adopt a shift system or put in place a shift system based on a formula that we are working with. Currently, we have our project team from the Ministry of Education visiting schools, measuring classrooms to determine the square footage of each of these rooms. And then there's a formula that is online that we can use. We put that information in and it will tell us how many students are allowed in a particular room based on the square footage of that room. So if a middle-sized school shows up where we have too many students in any one room, then we might have to move to a shift system for that. But definitely we have a number of small schools that would be there every day, full-time. Now this gives rise to some issues. Equity. If you're in a shift system, you might be receiving perhaps 2.5, 3 hours instruction daily. Whereas if your school is there every day, full-time, then you are getting at least 8 hours of instruction. 6 hours of instruction. And so this is one of the matters that we have to discuss and see how we can best work that out. In terms of secondary schools, apart from Basti High School and the Washington Archibald High School, the other 4 government-run secondary schools will be in full attendance. That's what their principals are proposing. Again, we are carrying out the same measures at these schools to measure classrooms to determine the number of students that would be seated, could be accommodated in each of these rooms. So if any of these other secondary schools would appear to be overcrowded after the work has been done, then we would have to say to these schools, then you will have to go on a shift system. But as of now, the Basti High School and the Washington Archibald High School are proposing a shift system. These would have to be further worked out and confirmed later on. During the first term, we are already declaring that we would have put a ban on all extracurricular activities, except in those cases where the extracurricular activity is organized by the Ministry of Education, or in the case of the independence activities. So during that time, no extra, especially external extracurricular activities will be approved. We want the focus to be completely or mostly on academic, the students having missed so much of the last academic year. There would be no assessment period. You know, sometimes schools have the last week or the last 2 weeks designated as exam period. We are saying to principals that we don't want this to happen during the first term in particular. Instead, continuous assessments will be taking place throughout the school term. And teachers will be encouraged to use their teaching periods, especially in the secondary school, to administer their assessment. During term 2, which is usually dubbed the sports term, as of now, we are saying that there will be no major sporting events. You know, each school having its own sports there, and then inter-primary, inter-secondary, and so on. For now, they're abandoning those until we get close to the time and we see what the situation is. During term 3, the national assessments and the regional assessments will take place. So the usual test of standards that we had to abort this year, these will be reinstated at the end of term 3 for the upcoming academic year. We are not certain yet as to what dates CXC would use for the examination period, if they would revert to the original dates that usually take place throughout the year, or if they would extend the time, such as August or late July, as in the case of this year. Specific dates are being identified where teachers would be preparing record cards and where record cards would be distributed. All of these would be confirmed and shared with the public. A number of health protocols have been put in place or been discussed. Some of them are quite similar to what was reported from the early childhood. In the case of daily screening, where students, adults, teachers, where they would be checked for their temperature, other symptoms, and so on, this would be recorded. The same information applies if somebody is showing strong symptoms of the COVID-19, they would not be allowed in. If persons develop these symptoms later in the day after they have been admitted to the premises, all schools would have a designated area as a sick bay where these persons would be taken. And of course, persons would have to be dispatched from school premises to seek urgent medical attention. We are hoping, with the assistance of UNICEF, to build a number of hand washing stations in all of our schools, both in St. Kitts and Nevis. This may not happen at the beginning of the school year, but we are putting in place, some schools already have their dispensers in place for the hand sanitization process to take place. The students in kindergarten, grade 1 and grade 2, there is some conversation as to whether these students would be allowed to wear a mask or not. That would have to be confirmed, but certainly the students from grade 4 right up to 5th form would be required to wear a mask while they're at school, in addition to their teachers. We are also working out the busing arrangements as to how many students will be allowed to travel on the bus, the school buses, at any one time. So all of these arrangements are being put in place, are being worked out, and we will continue to share information with the public as we make our final decisions. But as of now, these are essentially all of the information that we wish to share with the public, and we look forward to any questions that may come in at the end of today's briefing. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hodge, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education. I now invite Superintendent Cromwell Henry, Divisional Commander for District A, to update us on the Emergency Powers COVID-19 regulations.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams, and a pleasant good afternoon to all viewing this broadcast via whatever means. This afternoon, my presentation will take a different format. I have chosen to adopt the CMO's and Mr. Samuel's presentation format. So today I will do a PowerPoint presentation, hopefully to help me explain my presentation. Now, by now, most of us will be aware that we have new regulations. I've indicated in previous briefing that the old regulations would have expired on the 8th of August. And so we have new regulations that has been approved by His Excellency. And these regulations come into effect from today, the 8th of August, and runs until the 29th of August. Now, these regulations have some fundamental differences. There are some fundamental differences between these regulations and the previous ones. We continue to see further easing of the restrictions. And so today I will highlight some of the new provisions as well as to highlight the restrictions that have been lifted. Now, there has been some confusion in the past about what is a public place. Now, this regulation has sought to clear that confusion, and so it has defined public place with respect to the wearing of masks. Now, we know the wearing of masks continue to be an important aspect of the prevention of the spread of the disease, and so everything is being done to encourage our people to wear the mask. Public place is defined as an indoor or outdoor area, whether privately or publicly owned, to which the public has access by right or by invitation, expressed or implied, whether by payment of money or not. And it includes shopping centers, supermarkets, pharmacies, banks, utility departments, bars, drinking places and restaurants, hotels, schools, and all other educational institutions, hospitals, whether privately or publicly operated, churches or other religious establishments, public transportation, community centers, government offices, public markets, and other places or buildings of all types accessible to the public. So the definition is very broad, and it almost appears that once you leave your house, you're in a public place. Now, the regulation provides some exceptions to the wearing of masks. We've heard persons who are complaining that they cannot wear the mask for various reasons, and those were taken in consideration. And so the new regulations have created some exceptions for those persons who have underlying conditions, and the exceptions in Regulation 15.2 says a person shall not be required to wear a mask if he or she is under the age of 3 years old. So that would take care of Mr. Williams' concern whether the first grade and second grade should wear masks. If he or she suffers with a disability, cognitive impairment, dementia, asthma, chronic obstructive lung disease, or other similar health condition, or if he or she is within a private space, including a private vehicle. So these are the exceptions to the wearing of masks. If you're under the age of 3 years, you don't have to wear a mask. If you suffer from a medical condition listed here, or any disability, or if you are in your private space, if you're in your home or in your yard, or if you're in your private vehicle and you're out in a public place. Now, this particular regulation has created a lot of public discourse, but as I mentioned before, everything that is done in these regulations are to protect public health. And so we recognize that in order to encourage persons to wear their masks, we have to create some deterrents, find a way to make persons want to wear the mask. I will not say what I was going to say, but the regulation provides for fixed penalty notices, or what we call tickets, to be issued to persons who refuse to wear their masks. And the regulation on the Regulation 22.2, it says a police officer may issue a fixed penalty notice to any person who contravenes the provisions of Section 15 in relation to the wearing of a face mask in public places. And I define public places. Now, what this is doing is to creating some consequence for persons who refuse to wear their mask in these public places. And the fixed penalty that would be applied in this case would be $500. Now, we've been mentioning that there was a fine of $5,000. That $5,000 fine still remains in the regulation, but this is if you refuse to pay the $500 ticket and you have to go before the court. The magistrate now has the discretion, now has the power to increase that $500 fine to up to $5,000 and to imprisonment for 6 months. So you have an opportunity to pay the fixed penalty of $500, and there's a period of 10 days that is given to pay that fine. And if you refuse to pay that fine, then you're taken before the court, where the magistrate has the power to increase that penalty. Of course, these penalties can be avoided. It is not our intention to see anyone having to pay any of these fines if you just simply wear your mask and you don't have to pay any fine. Now, with respect to the easing of restrictions, we've seen some adjustments to an adjustment to the curfew hours. The curfew has been adjusted to begin at 2 a.m. until 4:59 a.m. This means that bars and restaurants can operate until 1 a.m. when they must be closed in order to allow their staff and patrons to adhere to the curfew. So the curfew now extends from 12 midnight to 2 a.m. And so the bars can also extend their operations up to 1 a.m. when they must be closed so that their staff could get home on time. However, the protocols still remain in place. All the requirements still remain in place. The patrons, all persons, expected to adhere to social and physical distancing protocols. All persons must adhere to hygiene protocols. No more than 8 members of the same household should be in close proximity to each other while you're in the bar or restaurant. And no more than 2 persons who are not of the same household shall be in close proximity or shall group together or share a table. The spacing between the tables shall allow for a minimum of 6 feet between persons, and all persons, including the restaurant staff, shall wear a face mask covering their nose and mouth, except, of course, when they are eating. So all the protocols remain in place. The only thing that has changed is the length of time that you could remain at the bar. Restrictions on social events. I've been getting a lot of questions from some entertainers whether they could have their functions now. I would say there is a little bit of leeway here, but the regulation remains that no person shall host, attend, or visit a private party, a banquet, ball, or reception, or any other type of social event, except with the written permission of the Commissioner of Police in consultation with the COVID-19 task force. So this suggests that there is a possibility that you could have some events, but of course there would have to be some consultation with the COVID-19 task force. Then the Commissioner would grant the permission having consulted with the task force. So there's some easing there in that regard. Education and religious instructions. We've heard from the Ministry of Education a while ago. All educational places of instruction shall remain closed. However, this regulation does not prohibit any activity referred to that is done by electronic means, electronic or virtual means, so that if you're having your educational activity by virtual means, that of course is encouraged. The opening of educational places to facilitate external examinations, CXC for example, you can open schools to facilitate CXC examinations, and the opening of public sector early childhood education centers. So those can be open, and we heard that as from Monday, some centers have been granted certification to operate. So early childhood education centers, they can operate, and so we expect next week to see some of those centers in operation. Now this, I would end here today in the interest of time. There are some other aspects of the of the regulation that we need to highlight, but we cannot go through all because we do not have sufficient time. But in subsequent briefings, those other aspects would be highlighted. We just want to remind us all to keep our distancing, continue to sanitize, and to keep ourselves safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Henry. I now invite Chief Medical Officer Dr. Hazel Laws to give us the Health Emergency Operations Center COVID-19 report. Dr. Laws.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, and a pleasant good afternoon to everyone. Well, the COVID-19 virus, or the new coronavirus, has altered all of our lives. It's August, and most persons in the work setting usually take leave during the summer months. This is August, and travel is now becoming a distant memory. Fitness is becoming a priority during this pandemic. So says The Economist article that I read this morning. And this is important because physical activity helps us to maintain a normal body mass index, or BMI. And that's good because the science is telling us that obesity, persons who are obese, if they were to contract COVID-19, their outcomes are not so good. They are at risk of developing the severe form of COVID-19. And so I implore us to continue exercising. And let me just pause and say that tomorrow, August the 9th, marks the one-year anniversary of the launch of SKN Moves. This initiative was launched last year on the 9th of August, and it promotes physical activity, it promotes healthy eating, and it highlights the importance of individuals ascertaining annual health checks. And so that's SKN Moves. Now, globally, in terms of the COVID-19 to date, there are over 19 million persons confirmed with this disease. In terms of the death toll, it's now over 716,000. In the United States of America alone, there are about 4.9 million confirmed cases and approximately 160,000 deaths. In the Caribbean region, the situation is not so bad. We have about 118,000 confirmed cases, and in terms of recoveries, that's good, almost 58,000. The death toll continues to be low, 1,918. Now, member states, CARICOM member states are reporting an increase in positive cases as a result of the reopening of their borders and the continued repatriation of nationals. In St. Kitts and Nevis, we continue testing suspected cases. To date, about 1,168 persons have been tested. At present, we have 36 persons in quarantine, 1 in isolation. We continue, our nationals continue returning home. At present, we have 37 nationals in government-designated sites, 29 in St. Kitts and 8 in Nevis. Between April the 24th and today, about 160 nationals have returned to the Federation. We have 1 active case of COVID-19 the individual continues to improve, almost recovered. Our last case was announced on July 10th, about 29 days ago. So it's now 29 days since we would have announced our last case. Now, as Superintendent Henry just said, the curfew continues between 2 a.m. to 4:49 a.m. daily. Now, I just wanted to just spend a little time explaining the rationale behind the curfew. Now, there are some non-pharmaceutical measures that we've been employing to help to contain the first wave of infections, and they include wearing of the face mask, hand hygiene, sanitation, physical distancing, whereby you maintain a distance of 3 to 6 feet away from other individuals, and social distancing, whereby you avoid crowds of people and mass gatherings. So now the curfew really means that, during the period of curfew, you head home, you're at home. And just by the mere fact that you're at home, you are just interacting with household members. So you are not on the strip, you are not at a party or a function. And so the curfew enforces physical and social distancing. And so it also reduces the transmission of the virus. So if you are at home, away from crowds, away from other individuals, the risk or the chance of spread or transmission of the virus from an infected individual to a non-infected individual is drastically reduced. And so the rationale behind the curfew is that it enforces physical and social distancing. Superintendent Henry spoke to the wearing of the face mask, but I just wanted to highlight some other points in this regard. And so the regulation says a person shall wear a face mask covering their nose and mouth when in a public place. And so he highlighted these public spaces already. So now what's the rationale behind this regulation? Now, the science, and there are many studies that have shown that the simple wearing of a face mask, again, protects you, or the individual, from picking up the virus from an infected individual. And if perchance you do have the virus, it reduces the spread of the virus from an infected individual to a non-infected individual. And so the rationale is that it reduces the spread of the virus. And so this regulation, the aim of this regulation is to help to protect the population, the people of the Federation from the virus. Now, the face mask protects frontline workers. Let me just share. I was exposed to the virus. I had to be tested. And so, yes, I was subjected to the nasopharyngeal swab, and luckily, my sample came back as negative. Frontline workers, we are protected by the wearing of the face mask. When I reflect on my exposure, what saved me was the fact that I was wearing a face mask and I maintained over 6 feet between myself and the individual who was infected. And so I'm sharing this to highlight the importance of wearing the face mask. Now, it says in the regulation that children under the age of 3 years old are exempted from wearing the face mask. So, in other words, children 4 years and above, they are expected to wear the face mask. Now, when the scientists, the researchers, they are looking at the 19 million persons who have already been affected by the virus, and they have found that children are impacted by COVID-19. However, guess what? Many of the children, they remain asymptomatic. They do not have any symptoms, or they only experience a mild form of the disease. However, a small proportion of children who contract COVID-19, they are at risk of developing a multi-system inflammatory syndrome. This is a significant condition. It's characterized by a high fever, prolonged fever, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. The child can develop a skin rash. You can have redness and swelling of the lips and tongue. You can have redness and swelling of the hands and feet. It's a condition whereby the child's immune system is hyperreactive. All right, and so children are at risk of developing COVID-19, and a very small proportion can be in fact impacted by this multi-system inflammatory syndrome. And so the wearing of the face mask is important, even in those children 4 years and above, because it's going to protect them. The science also tells us that children over 10 years have the potential to spread the virus like adults. So children can be super spreaders. And of course, our children, they interact with their grandparents, and their grandparents may have all the chronic medical conditions, etc. And so I'm just sharing these points to highlight the importance of wearing the face mask. The regulation goes on to say that persons shall not be required to wear a face mask if they suffer with a disability, cognitive impairment, dementia, asthma, chronic obstructive lung disease, and other similar health conditions. So, individuals with lung conditions like asthma, if you feel uncomfortable wearing the face mask, you can seek exemption. But I want to add, or I want to highlight a point here. Persons who suffer from asthma, if you do contract COVID-19, you are at risk of developing the severe form of the disease. And so I implore persons with lung disease, if you do seek exemption from wearing the face mask, you still need to do all you can to protect yourself from the virus. Because if you have a chronic lung condition, and if you develop COVID-19, chances are you may go on to develop the severe form of COVID-19. And so if you seek exemption, you may opt to stay at home. You have to do all you can to protect yourself or reduce your risk of exposure to the virus. I know of acquaintances and friends who do have asthma, and they are wearing their face mask because they are aware of their risk of developing the severe form of the disease. And so even though, there's an option where you can seek exemption, I am equipping you, I am providing you the information that if you do have these chronic conditions, and if you pick up COVID-19, you are at risk of developing the severe form of the disease. Okay, so sports. Now, the previous iteration of the emergency powers regulation allowed, participants in the various sporting disciplines to engage in training and practice sessions. Now, this iteration of the emergency powers regulation allows you to participate in inter-team and inter-club practice matches. So yes, practice matches are allowed between teams, between clubs, but without any spectators. And you need to seek, you need to apply, put in an application to be able to host these spectatorless inter-team, inter-club practice matches. I want to add that the COVID-19 task force would have met with the Ministry of Sports and representatives from all the sporting disciplines at the Warner Park. And then coming out of that very important stakeholder meeting, a committee was established. And the committee consisted of representatives from the different sporting disciplines. And that committee, they developed a very comprehensive document to guide the reopening of sports. And that is the document that the COVID-19 task force is using to guide the gradual reopening of sports. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Laws. I now invite Mr. Abdias Samuel, who is the chair of the COVID-19 National Task Force and the National Disaster Coordinator, to give us his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, and I am going to try my best. I don't know if the technical team is hearing me clearly with my mask on, but I will try my best, Mr. Williams. Good afternoon, all those who are tuning via radio, television, and those viewing online. Welcome to this briefing. You're not hearing me well? No. All right, thank you. Okay. All right, I want to start with my theme. I guess the technical team now advises that they can hear me better, yes? All right, very well. Dr. Wilkinson just told me he can hear me much better as well. All right, again, I want to start with my theme. I want to be the first to be last and last to be first. And I think we are doing a good job in terms of getting there. And we can see what is happening in the Caribbean region as we monitor our other CARICOM member states. Now, I want to highlight something first before I get deep into my presentation, and that is the recent travel advisory that has been issued by the United States of America and in most of the Caribbean countries. St. Kitts, as you're aware, only have one active case, as our 17th case has recovered nicely. And bearing in mind that we are opening our economy slowly, we are easing the restrictions that we have that were used, as Superintendent Henry said, in the best interest of public health and safety. So therefore, we want to advise the world that St. Kitts and Nevis is one of the best places that you can be right now. We continue to control our borders. Our borders are closed. However, we have said we are going in stages or phases whereby we have started with the repatriation of our nationals and residents. So we started with nationals first, then we move on to our residents. Then from residents, we know we have a number of individuals that are working in St. Kitts and Nevis, and they are contributing to our economic activities here, and hence we allow them to also return, those who have left. And from those who have returned, we also have a number of individuals who are married to citizens of St. Kitts and Nevis. We also have some investors who have vast interest in St. Kitts and Nevis. And these investors, again, have requested to return to St. Kitts and Nevis. And we are gradually allowing these activities to happen under a very controlled measure, extremely controlled. And if you want to compare St. Kitts and Nevis with a lot of the other countries, I think our economy has been doing well with the stimulus package that was introduced in St. Kitts and Nevis in March. And I think it was 3 months in the first instance. However, I am advised that Cabinet is reviewing this stimulus package as a seek to continue to stimulate the economy, and hopefully the economy can survive. So I wanted to highlight that because we have been placed at level 3. What does that mean at level 3? That due to our closure of borders, due to our COVID-19 situation, U.S. citizens traveling to St. Kitts and Nevis may find themselves with a number of challenges. For example, they may have to queue in lines, they may have to be delayed when it comes to the travel activities. So therefore, these are some of the things that they are advising their citizens on. I don't think it means that St. Kitts is a war-torn country or is in a war zone. It just simply means that St. Kitts and Nevis has some restrictions due to the border closures, airport closures. Really and truly, our airport is only closed to commercial flights. We have a lot of activities at the airports, and we see that day to day. For example, just a while ago, we had a number of individuals who arrived to the Federation from the United States of America. We have had individuals arrive to St. Kitts from the United Kingdom, Europe, and throughout the Caribbean. Today, we've had 4 of our nationals return from Guyana via the RSS plane. So there are activities that are happening at our ports. It is just that it's a new normal, how we are controlling it. So therefore, it will cause you to have some little bit of delays or do things different. So that is important to note. So therefore, I will say that we don't need to be worried that St. Kitts and Nevis is in a bad state, but rather than we have control measures in order to safeguard our citizens, our residents, and by extension, any visitors that visit St. Kitts and Nevis during this pandemic. Now, Superintendent Henry spoke to the events, and I was privileged to have a discussion with a few event planners. And in that regard, we have said that St. Kitts and Nevis is at a state right now that some restriction could be eased in order to stimulate activities and also look at the social component of our country. And to that, we have decided that events under a very controlled mean can occur. What do I mean by events? For example, you will have persons who want to do some fetes, want to do some party style. I think, Dr. Wilkinson, you will have to help me because I'm not a party guy, or maybe Les Roy, right? And so in sitting and discussing with them, what we have decided is, 1, event organizers, you must present a tax clearance certificate from the Inland Revenue to be considered. 2, you're going to have to provide us with protocols, such as the social distancing, physical distancing, hygiene protocols. Traceability, meaning we have to know who is coming to your event, is critical, because if someone who has attended your event may turn out to be a positive COVID-19 patient, then we need to trace. So all these little things need to be done. We will be having a meeting with these event organizers sometime this week, this upcoming week, or the following week, so that we could get this sector mobilized. It's very important. They have engaged me off and on. Again, please, I ask you not to compare this to anything else. Focus on your sector, bring ideas to us, and we will attempt to work with you to get your sector moving. We have also seen that the regulation has spoken to the hotels, opening of our hotels, as we are gearing up to opening our borders. Opening the borders is not just allowing commercial flights to come here. That's just one component of the entire picture or puzzle. Therefore, we have to make sure we have where persons can go. Accommodations. So in opening the hotels, it is required that hotels apply to the task force. The task force will then come, do an assessment, and once the hotels have satisfied the basic standards of hygiene, of physical distancing, of traceability, of applying sanitization measures and programs, then we will issue through the St. Kitts Tourism Authority or Nevis Tourism Authority a certificate of compliance from the Ministry of Tourism, meaning that you are able to open and provide services to anyone. That is critical for you to note. It is regulated, and we look forward to the compliance of the hotel industry and by extension the tourism industry at large. Again, there is ongoing training in the tourism sector, and I am appealing to all the stakeholders within the tourism sector to take advantage of the free training. Again, in these hard times, it's free. I am told in the past you would have had to pay for this training, and the Cabinet, in consultation with the St. Kitts Tourism Authority and other stakeholders, have decided to allow this to be free. So all persons desirous of undertaking this training, so you could get the seal of approval. That means that you have undertaken the training. That means that you can provide some support to the response effort and the fight against COVID-19 by building a resilient business place, so that we can actually remain resilient when our borders are open, and that is the ultimate goal for any country right now. So therefore, please contact Ms. Raquel Brown, Chief Executive Officer of the St. Kitts Tourism Authority, and register your business. In Nevis, please contact Ms. Jadine Yadi, Chief Executive Officer of the Nevis Tourism Authority, so that again, your business can become a good receiver of training, so that you could be resilient and generate economic activities. Just last week, I spoke about the security, and today I receive a number of calls from security firms stating that they are ready, they want to join and partner with the task force in order to generate income. They want economic activities. So I was pleased, and I want to thank those who took the opportunity to call and are willing to be a part of this process. Again, let us not become complacent, and I want to show you an image of something that happened on the 1st of August. So while Lesroy Williams jumped on a boat and he went over to Nevis, and also, you know, Dr. Wilkinson, I believe, I don't know about Dr. Lars, but this vessel that you see, the vessel, not the one with the gentleman sitting at the back, the other vessel, closer to the buoy, that vessel was traveling from St. Martin onwards to Guadeloupe. The captain of the vessel, which is one single person that was on the vessel, decided to enter our waters, or our closed borders. And he berthed at the Owali beach. And while berthing at the Owali beach, he came off the vessel, walked up to the restaurant, engaged in purchasing items, used the bathroom facility, and then was leaving until he was intercepted. This is why, because we don't have an outbreak in St. Kitts and Nevis, we need to still be vigilant. It's critical, and this is why every time, every day, we get up and we continue the fight. Supposedly, this individual would have been a positive case that would have just come into our country, entered our borders that are closed, spread the virus, might have left quietly, and then we have a major outbreak, because that same weekend was a festive weekend, where we saw a lot of people go over to Nevis and had a very festive weekend. So therefore, I am appealing to the general public to understand what we are trying to do to protect you and your livelihoods. And I am asking all to remain vigilant. You have to. When we open our borders, we will see that we are going to get cases. And if we don't build the resilience now, St. Kitts and Nevis can be reduced to one of those countries that have basically been overcome, like the Bahamas and otherwise. So again, remain vigilant, in this time. I want to just show you a video. Well, sorry, the technicians tell me that we may not be able, but I wanted to show a video of what we want to do at the airport in terms of the airport screening, where you can just walk up to the kiosk machine, and using your cell phones and other things, you can actually just, be screened, and then walk into the testing booth. We had a meeting with Parsons, the team from Parsons in the United States of America. The meeting was very, very informative. They are willing to support, and they acknowledge the work that has been done in St. Kitts and Nevis, and they are willing to support our activities. However, I must say to you, it's a very costly venture, and I am appealing to the business community to come on board and support the government in helping to put the best measures in place in the Caribbean region so that our airports can be resilient. Unfortunately, we won't get the video, but hopefully we will get the video another time. All right, so let's move on to the hurricane season. So as I wrap up, during the hurricane season, it has been deemed as extremely active, meaning that we have moved from 19 to 21 named storms to 24, which is stated by the Colorado State University as the most dire forecast in Colorado research team's 37-year history. Again, let me repeat, extremely active 2020 hurricane season with 24 named storms, including 5 major hurricanes, in the most dire forecast in Colorado research team 37 years history. This has been compared to the 2005 hurricane season, and we all know what happened in 2005. There was a famous hurricane that impacted the United States in 2005. I don't know if any of you remember that very, very disastrous hurricane, and that was Hurricane Katrina. Up to today, the New Orleans and the Gulf Coast is still recovering from that impact 15 years later. We have had 9 storms that have passed thus far, that from Arthur to Gonzalo to Hurricane Isaias. So Isaias would have been the last storm. So what is stated by the Colorado Colorado State University is they go up to 21 names. So the naming for the storms go up to 21. After 21, then they will move to the Greek alphabet to find more names to give some. I hope they find one name, Leslie Williams. So those are the storms for the 2020. I am appealing again to the general public to continue their preparedness measures so that when we if we are faced with any threat of any of these disastrous storms or hurricane, we can respond like we did the other day. Again, I was pleased with the response of the general public and the cooperation, and I hope that we can enhance on the successes and gains that we have made. Thank you, and we await your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samuel. For 1 minute, I was concluding that your presentation was about me and Dr. Wilkinson. But of course, I'm very good at distinguishing sense from nonsense. So, right. That brings us to the question and answer segment. And the first question, is our widespread advocating of the use of masks supported by science and reputable institutions like the World Health Organization? There are a lot of places in the USA that are not advocating the widespread use of masks. Dr. Wilkinson.
Thank you. I just want to choose my words very carefully here, because the widespread use of the mask everywhere is not supported by science. In other words, you don't need to sleep in your mask, you don't need to go and swim in your mask, you don't need to go on a hike by yourself up in the mountain and have your mask on. So you don't need to have your mask on every time, everywhere. The mask is a physical barrier that prevents the spread of the droplets that could be potentially infectious. Therefore, if you are going out in public, in order to reduce the transmission of the virus, especially if you're in a place where you can't physically distance, stay more than 6 feet from the other person, then it is important that you wear the mask, because you can transmit the virus to someone else if you're asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic. Also, the mask is very important for healthcare workers in protecting them from getting the virus, as Dr. Law spoke earlier about herself having the mask on, and that is what protected her from becoming infectious. Now, the World Health Organization actually recommends to all governments that they encourage the use of masks in public places, the non-surgical mask in public places, in order to reduce the spread of the virus. Now, we have to do what is best for ourselves. Yes, there are places in the United States where persons are not wearing masks. I think there's a rally right now in South Dakota, I think, where they have over 250,000 persons who are going to some motorcycle rally without a mask. But we have been seeing the ill effects of them doing that, and there's a study recently that said that if in the United States they don't start wearing their mask, by December they would have over 300,000 deaths. And so I am happy that from very early on in our federation we insisted on wearing the mask. Now, persons have started to become a bit complacent, the fact that we have not had a lot of cases, we haven't had any deaths, etc. And I believe the penalty that is associated with wearing the mask is in order to encourage persons to wear the mask. Now, sometimes persons ask, oh, so if I'm at a restaurant eating, is a policeman going to come in and give me a ticket? The policemen, they have common sense, and they are not going to just go and issue a ticket to every single person they see without a mask. They will assess the situation, and the Cromman himself said, if you're in your private space, if you're in a private vehicle, etc., you would not be issued a ticket. If you're in a restaurant eating, no one expects you to have a mask on and be putting food in your mouth at the same time. So they're going to use common sense when they're dealing with this, but this is to ensure that we control the spread of the virus, and so I'm happy that we have the enforcement laws here. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilkinson. The second question: I note the protocols for reopening the borders contemplate visitors from hotspots. Would persons coming from non-hotspots, such as Canada and other Caribbean territories, be required to undergo the 14-day quarantine in particular? I understand other protocols must apply to all incoming persons, but I'm specifically concerned about the quarantine requirement for non-hot spotters. Dr. Wilkinson.
I think one of the things we have said is that right now, we have a safe bubble here in St. Kitts. We haven't had a positive case for how long, you said, Dr. Laws? 29 days. And we want to keep it like that. And that's one of the reasons why we are slowly opening up internally, and you see a lot of activity being generated inside the country. And anyone who is coming in will be considered a suspect, whether you're coming from a hotspot area like Miami, or you're coming from Canada. And for now, the protocol that we have in place assumes that everyone is potentially infectious, and that is why you would have to have a test done before you get here. You would have to be quarantined for 14 days. And anything short of 14 days would mean that we are assuming some risk. And the safest way for us to go about controlling the spread of the virus within our country right now is the 14-day quarantine. I don't know if, for example, later on we'll have to make a balance between the health advice and the economic activity, because we've said before that we cannot contain the virus, but yes, suffer significantly economically. And so I see that there are a number of countries have limited their quarantine period. Some have 4-day, 7-day period of quarantine, but the shorter the quarantine period is the greater the risk you'll be taking on and the greater the chance of someone coming in with the virus. What we also don't want is, for example, someone were to come in here and we say that we're only going to quarantine them for 5 days, but they came in with the virus, they go back to the USA, and 6 days later, they turn positive and they say that they got the virus here in St. Kitts. And before you know it, we have a level 4 advisory being issued against our tiny nation from the great United States. And then we have to suffer the consequences of that. So I believe for now, we have to be safe. And wherever you're coming from in this world, for now, you'll be quarantined for 14 days.
Mr. Williams, that's a very important question, and I just wanted to add, being quarantined for 14 days is the ideal situation that reduces the risk of importation of the virus to the Federation to a minimum. An individual can come in from what you may deem as a non-hot spot, and with a pre-arrival test negative. They can be tested upon arrival. That test can be negative. And maybe after 3 to 7 days, that individual can be allowed to integrate into society. However, on day 10, that individual, if they were to be tested again, they can be positive. And now if that individual who now is positive is already walking around Bastille, we would have a serious problem. Yes? And so the ideal situation is that an incoming traveler be quarantined for 14 days, be tested, and once negative, they can be allowed to integrate into the society. A shorter quarantine period increases the risk of importation of the virus, and individuals would then spread the virus, and we would have a surge in cases. And this is what we are seeing in other Caribbean territories who have shortened the quarantine period. They all have a surge in the number of COVID-19 cases.
Okay, this next question. Coming out of a meeting at a preschool, we were told high school children cannot drop off any children anymore. Can someone elaborate on this, as some parents have to go to work before the opening of school? Ms. Brown?
Good afternoon again. As part of one of the rules for early childhood is that only a responsible adult should bring a child to a center and pick up a child. However, that rule has not been enforced for a while, and so we are saying during this COVID-19 period, we would want to enforce such a rule at this time. We are concerned about the health and safety of the children. Another issue is that because of the screening, if a child has to bring another child and that child has a temperature or shows any signs or symptoms of respiratory disorders, it means that that child will be stuck with that child for a period of time and will not be able to go to school. Thank you.
Next question, which is for one of the health authorities. I have heard that wearing the mask for long periods puts a bit of stress on our lungs. Can the CMO or Dr. Wilkinson confirm if this is true? If it is, should we as parents be concerned about this?
All of the masks that are advocated for use in the general public are basically fabric-based masks that one should be able to breathe freely through. The mask that one would have difficulty wearing for a prolonged period of time are the N95 type of mask and a higher grade where the seal is pretty tight. And those are not the masks that are recommended to be worn in the general public. One of the reasons, too, why it is said that the mask is recommended for persons 3 years and above, or any person who is not incapacitated in any way, is so that if at any point in time you develop any sort of distress, you should be able to simply pull the mask off of your face. And so no one is saying that you need to have that mask glued to your face and you have some respiratory distress and you cannot remove that mask. And so if you're in a public place and you're having difficulty breathing, you can easily pull the mask down and take a gasp of air. I'm pretty certain that the officers will understand that. Someone will come to your assistance, okay? And so I don't think that there is any health issue in relation to wearing the mask and protecting others from catching the virus with your respiratory droplets.
There is just another point I wanted to add about wearing the mask, and then I'll ask Superintendent Henry to come in if necessary. If you are exercising, as I was this morning, we had our walkathon from the cinema to the last roundabout in Frigate Bay, and I did not wear my mask during the actual exercise. However, at the end of the walk, when we were standing and talking, I placed my mask on. And so I would advise individuals, if you are exercising, running, jogging, please, you should not wear your mask during exercise. I do not recommend that you wear your mask during exercise. I've had such questions, and it's important to note. And again, the police officers will understand that this is the case. You won't be fined or charged if you are exercising and not wearing your mask.
Thank you, Dr. Laws. Some of the questions that I had here related to that, so you've answered about 2 or 3 of them. If you are renting a guest house and you have it registered online with bookings.com, etc., and someone books the guest house when the borders open, would that guest be obstructed from staying at the guest house apartment if it wasn't COVID approved? And the next question, where and when and what time is the training taking place for the COVID-19? Mr. Samuel?
Good. Mr. Williams, if I understand the first part of the question, right, is speaking about the pre-approval villas, correct? And yeah, guest house. All right. Once these facilities have been pre-approved after meeting the criteria that we are working on right now, then individuals will be able to access these villas or guest houses or whatever facility it may be once it's pre-approved. So meaning you're going to go through a process prior to arriving into the country. And once you reach to the country, then you will be allowed to go to that place for quarantine. I hope that answers that question. The second part of the question, Mr. Williams?
In terms of the training.
The training, yes, the training. The training is happening right now at the departure lounge. I think it is at the RLB International Airport. So at the departure lounge, I think that is where the training is happening. They are scheduled. Please contact Ms. Raquel Brown at St. Kitts Tourism Authority. I would have put up the numbers earlier. I also want to apologize to the persons who are placing questions on the YouTube. At the present moment, we are unable to get these questions. So if you could find the other means to place these questions, we will appreciate it. Thank you.
There is a question here about the Haitians who are staying at the St. Johnson Communications Center. And the question is, why can't the RSS aircraft take them back? Dr. Laws.
The immigration and the relevant ministries are presently organizing the repatriation of the Haitians, but there are some, issues that must be addressed before this is done. Thank you.
This next question, what if a traveler came for a week trip? How will that work out if their schedule won't allow them to be quarantined for 14 days? And if negative, can't stay any longer to fulfill that 1 week trip? Dr. Wilkinson.
I think it's very simple. For now, we say that you would have to be quarantined for 14 days. And so if you are coming in, you need to stay at least 14 days. If, for example, you're coming on your own private jet and you want to leave before the 14 days are over, you're free to leave. I don't think anyone will stop you from leaving. And so it all depends on how much you're willing to spend on your vacation. But the fact of the matter is we have a pandemic that is killing persons. We have thousands of persons who are dying daily from this pandemic, and we need to put the safety and the security of our nationals first ahead of people's time and leisure that they want to spend in the island. Yes, we want to get economic activity, but we need to make sure that at the end of this pandemic, if we get straight, people here are alive and well. And we cannot sacrifice anybody on the altar just for somebody to come here for 4 or 5 days and enjoy themselves and then end up spreading the virus. And so for those of you out there who want to come and visit, you understand what the protocols are now. They may change later, but for now, this is the protocol. And so if you're booking your trip, you take that into consideration.
Okay, we'll soon be wrapping up the questions. But this one, if a child becomes sick at school, how long should that child stay at school? Ms. Brown.
Good afternoon again. If a child becomes sick at a center, we are saying to the teachers to isolate the child immediately, disinfect and sanitize the area. That child will be sent into an identified isolated area at the center, and the parents will then be informed. We are asking, we are appealing, we are encouraging parents to be responsible and come and collect the child, we are giving you at least 1 hour. We are also encouraging the business community to release parents. We would have heard over the years that the complaints from the proprietors and the supervisors is that parents, when they are called, they do not show up. And so we're asking parents to be a little more responsible, business community to release the workers so that they can collect the children. In early childhood, we really cannot accommodate sick children, as the caregiver would have a number of other children to care for. Thank you.
This question is for Mr. Hodge from Vaughan Radio. With respect to kindergarten, grades 1 and 2, returning to school from 8:30 a.m. to 3:30 p.m., does that mean they will have to go to school on the 7th and 8th as well?
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Now, the 7th and 8th are teachers reporting, only teachers reporting on the 7th and 8th. The students begin coming in on the 9th.
That was our last question. I thank you very much for your questions, and of course, we are here to answer your questions, as the management of the COVID-19 pandemic has to do with all of us. We have questions, and questions need to be answered. Mr. Samuel.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Williams, again. Okay, to everyone, I forgot something to advise you of something that is going to be happening effective Monday. Effective Monday, 10th of August, all incoming passengers into St. Kitts and Nevis must provide a RT-PCR test, a negative RT-PCR test 72 hours prior to arriving on St. Kitts and Nevis. Again, all incoming passengers returning or coming into St. Kitts and Nevis must provide a negative RT-PCR test prior to arriving in St. Kitts and Nevis. And this test must be submitted to the Chief Medical Officer. Again, this test must be submitted to the Office of the Chief Medical Officer. And I wish to provide the email address where you can send this test, and that is hazel.laws@gov.kn. Again, that's HAZEL.LAWS@gov.kn. So all incoming passengers effective Monday, 10th of August, must present a negative RT-PCR test before arriving on St. Kitts and Nevis. Before we move, I think the technician advised me that we have the video. So I would like to share with you this video as per our intended procedure for receiving arriving passengers when we open our borders.
We've developed an integrated airport screening program that provides technology-enabled health assessments to minimize traveler exposure to viruses. You'll use our self-guided, touchless kiosk before entering the terminal. Biometrics verify your identity and travel information. Complete a short health questionnaire using either gesture tracking on the kiosk or a mobile accessible app, while sensors simultaneously scan for signs of COVID-19 or other communicable illnesses. Success! You're clear, indicating you're at low risk for COVID-19. Your mobile boarding pass will update to approved, meaning you can enter the terminal through the automated doors. Save time and minimize exposure by placing your checked bags at a non-contact bag drop. If you are not cleared during the pre-screen, your procedure will be a bit different. An on-screen message will notify you if the scan and health questionnaire identify you as a potentially high risk for COVID-19. You'll also receive a notification on your mobile boarding pass with an instruction to proceed to the on-site testing lab. Individual booths provide privacy for the virtual doctor consultations and distancing for additional health assessments. During your virtual doctor visit, a certified lab attendant is present to perform a COVID-19 test if required. If you test positive for COVID-19 or another virus, you will be notified to contact your health provider and self-quarantine for the recommended time. Success on this secondary health screening means you're now approved to enter the terminal. At the TSA checkpoint, a second touchless kiosk confirms your identity, travel plans, and health assessment results. You'll be directed to an agent if the kiosk identifies any issues. When you're cleared, your mobile boarding pass is updated to approve access through the automated gates into the integrated scanning corridor. Once in the corridor, you and your carry-on bag are scanned simultaneously for security threats. A successful scan grants you access to the concourse through the automated gates. Travel with confidence that our new normal is a safe normal. Parsons, delivering a better world.
So, thank you for watching the video. These are some of the innovative means and ways in which we hope to enhance and prepare our ports of entry to receive incoming passengers during this pandemic. And as you saw in the video, the testing booth, there was several models that were shown to us from a model of 4, a model of 12, from 4 to 12. We looked at several models, and some of the prices range that was given to us for the 12 booth component was $225,000 US. And now the beautiful thing about it is that you are protecting the frontline workers, the health workers who have to just do the test. And as you saw, persons just walk into the testing booth, they will be tested, and then they can leave. And you will say, well, how will they capture the information? Well, the kiosk in itself will provide you with a receipt, and that receipt will have a barcode, and that barcode will be scanned in the booth and provide the information for the officer or the health officer who will be testing. In that way, everybody remains as contactless as possible. So this is the innovative ways. However, it needs, again, an all-of-society approach for us to put those kiosks, which range from $25,000 to $75,000 US. And if we want it even more updated, it goes up to $85,000 US for one kiosk machine. So this is what we want to do, and we seek your support as an all-of-society approach to fortify our borders. Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Samuel. That brings us to the end of our COVID-19 press briefing for today. I want to thank the Director of Early Childhood Education, Ms. Kimona Brown, for her presentation on the reopening of daycare childhood centers here in St. Kitts and Nevis, those that have been approved to reopen. I want to also thank the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Education, Mr. William Vincent Hodge. I think he has another name that goes along with that, but I can't remember it. Also, I thank Superintendent Cromwell Henry, Divisional Commander for District A, our Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Hazel Laws, our Medical Chief of Staff, Dr. Cameron Wilkinson, Mr. Abdias Samuel, Chair of the COVID-19 National Task Force, and our National Disaster Coordinator. We also thank Mrs. Jacobs, Christmas Jacobs, I got it mixed up, for always providing sign language here for a very important group in our society. We thank ZIZ and we continue to thank all the media for participating with us, collaborating with us in terms of the dissemination of information. Information management is very important, especially with the COVID-19 pandemic. To all of you who joined us today, who listened to us, who sent in your questions, and who continue to pay attention to what is happening here in St. Kitts and Nevis, the region, and internationally with the COVID-19 pandemic, it is extremely important so that you can keep yourself and others safe and healthy. Next Wednesday, we will be back for another NEOC COVID-19 press briefing. Until then, take care. I am Les Roy Williams.